Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be taking a look at Saudi Arabia's bid to host the 2034 Men's World Cup.
Yeah.
And FIFA has really kind of given them the green light here.
Oh, yeah.
They gave their bid a record-breaking score of 4.2 out of 5.
Right.
Which basically makes it a sure thing that they'll be the hosts in 2034.
Seems like it.
But is this really just about a soccer tournament? I mean,
Yeah.
Not really. We're going to be unpacking the potential benefits, the serious concerns, and whether this whole thing can really spark some positive change in Saudi Arabia or if it's something else entirely.
You know what's really interesting here is this score that FIFA gave them, 4.2 out of 5, is actually higher than what the joint bid from Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. got for the 2026 World Cup.
Oh, wow.
And get this, it'll be the first 48-team World Cup hosted by a single country.
Wow.
So this is a huge moment for the tournament's history and for Saudi Arabia's ambitions on the world stage.
So 4.2 out of 5, that's got to be some kind of record.
Yeah.
What was it that really wowed FIFA?
Well, one thing that really stood out in their report was Saudi Arabia's commitment to sustainability.
Okay.
They actually call the environmental impact low risk, even with all the new construction they're planning. And they're also pushing this idea that the tournament could be a catalyst for positive change, especially in areas like labor rights and freedom of expression.
Now, hold on a second. We've all heard about Saudi Arabia's human rights record.
Yeah.
Didn't FIFA themselves flag some risks there?
Well, yeah, they did label the human rights risk as medium.
Medium.
But their argument is that they don't want to exclude countries just based on their general human rights situation. They're more focused on how bidders plan to address risks that are specifically related to the tournament.
So they're saying, let's just focus on those few weeks of the World Cup and not the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
Okay.
And it does raise some serious questions. Is FIFA being naive, thinking that a soccer tournament can really change a country?
Right.
Or are they kind of overlooking some pretty big red flags?
Well, human rights groups definitely aren't holding back. Amnesty International, for example, is warning about the potential for things like exploitation of migrant workers, discrimination, even deaths during these massive construction projects.
It's a lot like what we saw with Qatar 2022.
It's almost eerie how similar those concerns are to what happened in Qatar. And what's even more concerning is that FIFA was actually called out for making false claims about Qatar's environmental impact.
Yeah.
A Swiss regulator found them out on that.
Right.
So it makes you wonder, how much can we trust their assessment of Saudi Arabia's bid?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Are we headed for like a Qatar 2.0, but on an even larger scale?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the environmental concerns are definitely huge.
Yeah.
FIFA admitted that the 2030 World Cup, which is being held across 3 continents, will have a really big negative impact on the climate because of all the air travel.
Right.
So now imagine that with Saudi Arabia's plans, which involve all this new construction.
Wait, but didn't FIFA say that Saudi Arabia's bid was low risk when it came to sustainability?
Yeah, that's what they said in their report. Despite the obvious impact that all this new construction is going to have.
Okay.
It seems like they're putting a lot of faith in Saudi Arabia's promises to offset those impacts.
Right.
But how much can we really trust that, Remember that Swiss regulator's findings about Qatar.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a pattern emerging here, and Saudi Arabia has been making some bold moves in the world of sports lately. They launched Levy Golf.
Yeah.
They bought Newcastle United, a Premier League team, and they're hosting all sorts of other events. What do you think their game plan is?
Well, it all ties into their Vision 2030 strategy.
Okay.
They really want to diversify their economy, move away from relying so much on oil, and frankly, improve their image on the world stage.
Right.
And they see sports as a major way to achieve those goals.
So it's more than just national pride. They're really trying to rebrand themselves as a global power player.
Exactly. And while FIFA talks about the potential for positive change, some critics are calling this whole thing sports washing.
Sports washing.
Yeah.
We hear that term thrown around a lot these days, but what does it really mean in this context?
Well, imagine a country with a questionable human rights record hosting a major sporting event like the World Cup.
Okay.
They spend billions of dollars building these amazing state-of-the-art facilities.
Right.
They invite the world's media and create this incredible, dazzling spectacle.
Yeah.
And all the focus is on the competition.
Yeah, the excitement, the feel-good stories.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in all of that, the country's negative aspects kind of get swept under the rug, or at least they get a lot less attention.
So it's almost like a PR strategy to create this more favorable image, even if it doesn't really reflect what's happening on the ground.
Exactly. And that's the debate we're seeing right now with Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Is this World Cup bid a genuine attempt to use sports to create positive change? Or is it just a clever way to distract from their human rights record? It's definitely something we need to keep in mind.
Okay, so that's a great overview.
Yeah.
Let's kind of zoom in on a few specifics. Now, one thing that really jumps out at me is the whole Winter World Cup situation.
Right.
Saudi Arabia is known for its brutal summer temperatures.
Oh, yeah.
Did FIFA's report say anything about that?
They did. They actually highlighted that daytime temperatures in Riyadh during the summer months can easily go over 40 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
Which makes a June or July tournament pretty much impossible.
Yeah, 40 degrees. That's not exactly soccer weather.
No.
So are we looking at the same time frame as the Qatar World Cup, or could they try a different window?
The FIFA report acknowledged that scheduling is complicated.
Yeah.
And that they need to work with different stakeholders to figure out the best time.
Okay.
So while a November-December tournament seems most likely, it's not totally set in stone yet.
Right.
But one thing is for sure, another Winter World Cup would mean another disruption to the global soccer schedule.
Definitely. And speaking of disruptions, the environmental impact of building all this new infrastructure in Saudi Arabia can't be ignored.
Right.
How can FIFA say that their bid is low risk and then turn around and we see all this construction going on?
That's a really great question, and it's something we're going to be discussing in a lot more detail in the next part of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We'll also look at those potential solutions you mentioned earlier, the ones that could help make sure that this World Cup has a positive impact, not just for Saudi Arabia, but for the whole world.
Okay, so we've got a lot more to unpack here.
We do.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive deeper into these really critical issues.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive on Saudi Arabia's 2034 World Cup bid.
We've uncovered some really interesting stuff already.
We have.
Before the break, we were discussing Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030.
Right.
And their big push into the world of sports.
Yeah, it's more than a push. It's a massive investment.
Yeah. How much are we talking here?
Billions of dollars poured into things like launching Live V Golf, acquiring Newcastle United, which is a Premier League club.
Yeah.
Attracting all these high-profile sporting events to the country.
So they're really going all in on sports as a way to boost their global image.
Yeah.
But isn't that just sports washing?
Well, that's exactly the criticism they're facing.
Right.
And it's a debate that's only going to intensify as we get closer to 2034.
Yeah.
But, let's play devil's advocate for a second. What if hosting the World Cup actually does bring some positive change to Saudi Arabia?
Okay.
Is that really impossible?
I like to be optimistic, but I'm also a realist.
Sure.
I mean, we've seen countries use these mega events, the Olympics, the World Cup,
right,
as a smokescreen before.
Yeah.
So how can we be sure this time will be different?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to answer it, we need to look beyond the hype and the promises.
Okay.
We need to see what actually happened in other host countries.
Okay.
Did South Africa really experience a lasting positive impact from hosting the 2010 World Cup? Did the 2008 Olympics really create a more open and free China?
Right. The answers are complicated, and they're definitely up for debate.
Yeah.
What I'm struggling with is the gap between FIFA's optimism and the real concerns raised by human rights groups.
Yeah.
What are they most worried about when it comes to Saudi Arabia?
The biggest concern is the treatment of migrant workers. Amnesty International has already issued warnings about exploitation, forced labor, even deaths during those construction projects.
Yeah.
It's like a repeat of what we saw in Qatar.
It's hard to forget those images from Qatar.
Yeah.
The stories of worker abuse.
Right.
And the toll that those projects took. And it's not just Amnesty International voicing these concerns.
Yeah.
Didn't FIFA's own evaluation report acknowledge some issues?
They did. Their report uses phrases like gaps and reservations when talking about Saudi Arabia's track record with human rights.
Interesting.
It's like they're admitting that there are problems.
Yeah.
But they think those problems can be fixed in the next decade. Is that realistic?
I don't know. 10 years seems really optimistic to me.
Yeah.
Especially given how much needs to change. And what about the concerns that go beyond labor rights?
Right.
Things like freedom of expression, treatment of LGBTQ plus individuals.
Yeah, those are crucial points.
These are basic human rights, not just issues to be addressed for a few weeks during a tournament.
And it highlights a huge contradiction in FIFA's decision.
Yeah.
I mean, Saudi Arabia is known for cracking down on dissent, restricting personal freedoms, criminalizing homosexuality.
So how can FIFA, an organization that claims to champion inclusivity and diversity, justify giving the World Cup to a country with that kind of record?
That's a good question.
It feels like a huge double standard.
It does.
On one hand, they want to spread the love of the game globally.
Yeah.
But on the other, they're obligated to uphold basic human rights.
Right. It's a difficult balance.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if they're prioritizing profits over principles.
It really highlights the power that FIFA has and the responsibility that comes with that.
Absolutely.
Their decisions have far-reaching consequences, not just for the sport, but for the host country and for the global community.
Yeah. And they've been criticized for lacking transparency and accountability.
That's a whole other deep dive right there.
It is.
But for now, I want to focus on what we can do.
Okay.
What can we as informed individuals actually do about this situation?
Well, it's easy to feel powerless against an organization like FIFA.
Yeah.
But our voices do matter.
Yeah.
We can start by staying informed,
Okay.
engaging in these conversations like we are now, and supporting those groups
Yeah.
that are fighting for human rights and worker protections in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, great starting point. What else?
We can use our influence as fans to put pressure on our own soccer associations and on the sponsors of the World Cup.
Yeah.
They need to be held accountable for supporting an event that might come at a high cost.
And we're consumers too.
Exactly.
We can choose to support brands that align with our values and boycott the ones that ignore human rights abuses.
Our choices make a difference. They send a message.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we're not just passive spectators.
Are not.
We have power.
We do.
We can demand better from FIFA, from Saudi Arabia, and from everyone involved in bringing the World Cup to a country with such a complicated human rights record.
Yeah.
The World Cup is supposed to be a celebration of soccer.
A global festival.
But it shouldn't come at the expense of human dignity, equality, or basic freedoms.
Well said.
We need to look beyond the spectacle, beyond those exciting matches, and ask those tough questions.
Like,
who benefits from these mega events?
Yeah.
And at what cost?
And whose voices are being silenced?
Whose rights are being ignored?
These are the questions that FIFA, Saudi Arabia, and all of us need to be thinking about as we head towards 2034.
You know, it's interesting to think about how we can use what we've learned from past World Cups, both the good and the bad, to shape a better future for the tournament.
Yeah.
What would that even look like? What can we do to make sure the World Cup leaves a positive legacy?
That's a question we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the show. So we've talked about the controversies and the ethical questions around Saudi Arabia's bid for the 2034 World Cup.
We have.
Now let's focus on solutions.
Okay.
It's easy to criticize.
Right.
But what can we actually do to make sure these mega events are a force for good?
Well, I think you're right. We need to move past just pointing out problems and start thinking about how to create a more positive and ethical future for these events.
Okay.
And it starts with FIFA.
Okay.
They have so much power and influence.
Yeah.
And they need to use it responsibly.
So let's get specific. What can FIFA do to address those human rights concerns we've been talking about?
Well, one crucial step is for FIFA to establish clear and enforceable standards for things like labor rights,
Okay.
freedom of expression,
Right.
and non-discrimination.
And those standards can't just apply during the tournament itself.
Exactly. They need to be in place from the very beginning during all the preparations.
So basically protecting the rights of every worker involved.
Yeah, from the people building the stadiums to those providing services throughout the event.
No more trust us approach.
Right.
We need to see real proof that things are changing.
Absolutely.
And that leads to another question. How can we make sure FIFA is held accountable?
Transparency is key.
Okay.
There needs to be independent monitoring and auditing of both FIFA and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Human rights organizations, labor unions, environmental groups, they should all have access to the sites, to the workers, to the data.
Okay.
FIFA can't be allowed to grade their own homework.
It's about shining a light on the whole process, not just the end result.
Exactly.
And we also need to talk about the environmental impact.
Yeah.
How can FIFA claim that Saudi Arabia's bid is low risk when we know what it takes to host an event this big?
Well, FIFA needs to be honest about the carbon footprint of these events.
Right.
No more greenwashing. They need to set ambitious and concrete sustainability targets.
Right.
They need to actually follow through.
Yeah. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. We need to see a shift away from those huge construction projects towards more sustainable practices like renovating existing facilities,
Okay.
and using local materials.
I like that idea of moving away from bigger is better.
Yeah.
Maybe we need smaller regional events in the future.
Yeah, that's worth considering.
Something that reduces the need for all that travel and construction.
It's time to get creative and find new models that are better for the planet and the people.
And it's not just FIFA's responsibility.
Right.
Fans have a role to play, too.
Absolutely.
We can't just cheer for our teams and ignore everything else going on.
We can't.
So how can we be more responsible fans?
It starts with education.
Oh, okay.
Fans need to learn about the situation in Saudi Arabia,
Right.
about the potential risks and the concerns that human rights groups are raising. And then they need to decide if they want to attend the tournament knowing what they know.
So it's about being aware of what our choices mean.
Yeah, both as individuals and as a group.
We have a voice, and we can use it.
We can
We
read
can
it.
support those human rights organizations.
Yes.
Engage in online discussions, write to our soccer associations,
Yep.
and put pressure on sponsors to do better.
Absolutely.
We're not just passive observers, we have power.
We do.
And we need to demand better from FIFA, from Saudi Arabia, from anyone involved in bringing the World Cup to a country with this kind of human rights record.
Right.
And this isn't just about the World Cup.
No.
This applies to all mega events.
The Olympics, Formula One races.
Anything that attracts global attention and investment.
Yeah, we need to demand higher standards from the organizations involved and hold them accountable for their actions.
It's about recognizing that these events have a real impact on people's lives, on the environment,
Right.
on how the world sees things.
Yeah. They can be a force for good, but only if we hold ourselves and the organizers to a higher standard.
Ultimately, it's about making sure that these events leave a positive impact,
Yeah.
both for the host country and for the world.
It's about using the power of sport to create a better future, a more just equitable and sustainable future.
Well said. This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
And I want to thank you for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From FIFA's evaluation process to Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 to the concerns about human rights, labor exploitation, and the environment.
Right.
We've talked about sports washing and the potential for real positive change.
And hopefully we've encouraged our listeners to think critically about their role in all of this.
Yeah.
It's not just about the games themselves. It's about the values we uphold, the impact we have in the world we want to create.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final question to think about. If you were a decision maker at FIFA, knowing everything we've discussed today, how would you vote on Saudi Arabia's bid? What would be your top priorities? And what compromises, if any, would you be willing to make?
It's a really complex issue with no easy answers.
There's no perfect solution.
No.
But by having these conversations,
Well,
by demanding better,
right.
by holding those in power accountable,
Yes.
we can help make sure that the beautiful game lives up to its name both on and off the field.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep demanding better.